Do you want to create more freely and frequently without overthinking your every decision? Well, then you should start a Commonplace junk journal. The possibility and choices that you can make in your junk journal practice are endless, and this can feel overwhelming at times and will stop you from creating the art that you actually want to make. In a previous video, I mentioned that you need to embrace the spirit of practice, especially when you are a beginner junk journaler. The way that I do that is by maintaining a Commonplace junk journal. It's the place where I experiment with new techniques and materials and ideas without any pressure. And it just keeps me in love with junk journaling. So I asked you all on Instagram what made you fall in love with this craft in the first place, and most of the responses were about accessibility and ease and freedom of expression. And I agree with all of them. That's why I fell in love with this craft too. And sometimes it's hard to remember what attracted us to junk journaling because it can get really complicated really quick, especially if you're working on a big project. It's easy to lose sight of the reason why we're creating art in the first place. A Commonplace junk journal is my way back to that initial love and interest, and I would like to share that all with you today. By the way, I'm Bree, and this is what we're going over today. I'd also like to say thank you to Your Creative Studio for gifting me their May ephemera box. I'll be using their ephemera in today's video. You can find a link to their website in the description below. So let's start with a little history lesson. Scrapbooks in American Life described Commonplace books as a self-made anthology. They were notebooks meant to collect notable parts of lectures, passages of literature, science notes, and other fragments of academic thought and ideas. They grew in popularity among schoolboys and academics starting in the early Renaissance era. These journals were one of the earliest forms of scrapbooks that we know today. With innovations in printing and accessibility, these books evolved from strictly using handwriting to also using a combination of clippings and typewritten notes paired with handwriting. It's also important to note that the content of these journals wasn't just copied quotes and texts, but also the journal keeper's opinions and observations. This style of journal keeping differs from a diary because it doesn't rely on chronology or autobiographical information. Although similar in aesthetics, it's not a scrapbook because its purpose is more than preservation and creative documentation. Commonplace books were reference tools for study, and their purpose was to help enrich projects outside of itself. For instance, the notes taken and arguments formulated within the journal were meant to help write a thesis paper. A Commonplace junk journal serves the same purpose. It's a place for you to try new ideas, repeat old ones, take time to do a deep dive into a particular aspect of the craft without the pressure of perfection. I believe it's really important for a beginner junk journaler to start with a book like this, opposed to jumping in headfirst into a big, themed, and complex book project. This style of junk journaling is where you embrace the spirit of practice. All you need to get started is a book, literally any book, simple materials, and the right mindset. Maybe it's just me, but the cheaper the book, the less I care about making a mess in it. So if you're a beginner, I wouldn't recommend making a journal with really expensive papers or intricate binding and designs. A basic composition book will do, or make your own book with simple binding and materials. The size and number of pages are also something to consider. I personally like using smaller books with fewer pages because it feels less intimidating. But it has taken me years of trial and error and a bunch of incomplete journals to come to this understanding. Experimentation is everything. The journal is an essential part of your practice, but it means very little if it's hindering your process to get started with filling pages. So yes, pick or make a journal that makes you want to create art in it, which might mean that you use expensive materials in an intricately designed book. But I've found in my experience that the more plain the journal is, the more likely I am to fill it. So what kind of materials should you use? This may be a controversial take, but I encourage you to use any and all of your materials in your stash. That includes the vintage, the rare, and expensive specialty ephemera. When I first got started with collecting materials for my junk journals, I definitely had pieces that I kept putting off using until I started that big and important themed project. I'm sorry, friends, but this mindset is a slippery slope into excessive hoarding and overspending, and perpetuates a belief that your skills as an artist is not good enough to create the art you actually want to make. Boo, we're not here for that energy. Use all of the materials. I use real photos, rare ephemera coupled with true junk because it helps me build confidence in my ability as an artist. I don't do it for every page, but it's important to include those specialty pieces here and there because when you do get to that big and important project, you'll feel less intimidated and more confident in your choices. Okay, so what mindset should you have? Remember that a commonplace junk journal is about practice. You're trying out ideas that may evolve into something that you'll reference later. My mindset when I'm starting on a new page is focused on what I want to practice or explore or capture. I may start by thinking about what I want to get better at. Examples would be I want to experiment with page layouts, or I want to learn more about layering with stamps, or I want to improve my handwriting, or I just saw this creator do something really cool with this material and I want to see what it looks like when I try it. Regardless of what it is, keep your objectives simple and remember that this is all an exercise in practice. So we've covered a lot so far, and we are approaching the last section of the video where I'm going to do a journal with me session with your creative studio materials, and I'm going to share my 3 practical tips for getting started with filling a blank page. And believe it or not, it doesn't start with the materials, it starts with tidying up your space. I like to start with a fresh desk, putting away tools that I know I won't use, and do some light reorganization of what I will most likely use. You know the saying, a cluttered room is a cluttered mind, and that definitely holds true for me. But more than that, I often find materials that spark my imagination as I'm moving things around on my desk. Which leads me to the next tip, which is to create yourself a little kit. I always start with my 1, 2, 3 method of creating a kit, which is 1 sticker or image, 2 colors, and 3 sheets of paper. This is the base of my kit, but I may pull a few things out here and there to keep my options open. But if I'm starting at a place of uncertainty and already feel like I'm overthinking the process before I even begin journaling, I stick to the 1, 2, 3 kit. The limitation feels comforting. As I mentioned earlier, it's helpful to approach a blank page with an objective. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with this page, and that's an okay place to begin. But my process to get me moving and out of the decision paralysis phase starts with taking inspiration from the materials I pulled out from my kit. I was attracted to this bird, and then I got the idea to make a cluster to accentuate the bird. And so my objective for this journal session became to experiment with making clusters. Once I committed to that plan, the collage took shape effortlessly. This process is similar to how those schoolboys used to use their Commonplace books. They'd find a passage that inspired them and then made annotations and recorded their thoughts. New ideas in art are not created in a vacuum. They're a response to a thing that existed before it. Remember that the next time you feel in a rut. You just need one thing that sparks an emotion or an idea. A lot of pages in my journals were created because I simply liked a wrinkle on a paper bag. If you need more inspiration on how to jumpstart your creativity, I recommend you watch this video next where I uncover some of the roadblocks that we experience as new junk journal artists and offer solutions on how to get past it to make the art that we want to create. And I'd also like to say a big thank you to Buy Me a Coffee members, Shauna, Robin, Susan, Kathy, Laura, Emily, and Jane. Thank you so much for your support in making this video possible. So with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video.